you need to be basically an independent science. And unfortunately, today, the propaganda against that for some reason is just really strong, right? And there's nothing wrong with you doing your own research, right? And drawing your own conclusions, right? Unfortunately, for whatever reason, that like they basically tell you that it's wrong to experiment on yourself, to try new things, right? And a lot of this honestly comes from like these fear mongering, like sellout, like fat scientists, if we're being honest here, right? Right, these same people that prescribe drugs like morphine, right, which is like a literal drug, right, and other types of like drugs, right, and tell you it's fine to eat processed foods that literally cause cancer, right? So that's why I don't recommend just blindly following scientists, right? AKA also known as like following the science, right? Not to mention, it's kind of interesting when you look at it. Ever since, um, the word science in and of itself is actually a new term. Before this, it used to be called natural philosophy, right? Science used to be called natural philosophy, right? And ever since the change, people have wrongly assumed that science is this absolute truth and can never be wrong and it can never be questioned, right? And I think that's like a very big misdoing on its part because people just assume that, oh yeah, science said so, right? Even though, like, when you look deeper into that so-called like study, you're like, wait, there's not. They haven't accounted every variable, right? Or a lot of variables, in fact, right? Right. And the irony is that like science, if we're being honest here, is more of a philosophy than anything, right? And even that, like the science in and of itself is based, I guess, like metaphysics, right, if we're being honest here, right? Because the scientific method in and of itself was actually, like, if you trace back its origin, right, it was originally by this ancient Muslim polymath, right? His name was Ibn al-Haytham, right? Who actually got it from a Quran verse, right? So if we actually look into it, science is based on observation and experimentation, right? Right. So that's what I'm basically telling you guys to do and run trials on yourself, right? And do other stuff. This goes for anything I teach on this channel as well regarding health and everything. Maybe what I'm saying works, right? And maybe it doesn't. But don't be afraid to try, right? Because at the end of the day, right, there's too many problems with just following like experts, right? At the end of the day, because when we look at these so-called experts, right, a lot of them aren't healthy, right? And even when you look into like, you can go down the rabbit hole and like look into how the education system is funded and who's funding it and all this, and basically they call anything that's a natural remedy or whatever, they call that like pseudoscience, right? Even though that is probably better for you, right? The irony, right? They describe your potent drugs, like I said, like morphine, right? Assuring us that it's safe, but it's not. Clearly, it's not, right? And they encourage the consumption of processed foods, right? Which again, I said this in my other video where I talked about how to give up junk food, right? Where a lot of these like doctors will tell you, oh, it's not bad once in a while, and they make you cope better, right? But the reality is, it is bad, even once in a while, right? Because it's never once in a while. It's always a lot of the time, a lot of the while, right? Right. Now, am I saying like all of them are wrong per se? No, there are some that are like, that are on the truth, if you ask what you want to call it, right? But even then, it's a reminder to not just blindly follow, because at the end of the day, humans can make errors, right? Right. That's just true in and of itself, right? And if you look at like I was telling you guys, right? The pioneers, he was a Muslim polymath, right? Ibn al-Haytham, right? Who emphasized human endeavor, right? Including science, of course. And he's actually the one who came up with he came up with how sight works, and arguably came up with like the first camera, right? The pinhole camera, right? And because of him, like we basically have the camera now, and that's how you're watching this video, right? Right. And he's basically regarded even as the first like scientist in a way, because now people can argue that, oh, like the ancient Greeks were like scientists, but if we're being honest here, they were more like philosophers. They didn't necessarily conduct experiments and trial and errors and write massive books on it per se, the way that Ibn al-Haytham did. That's why he's more so regarded as the first, like, I guess you could say, modern scientist, right? Right. I mean, I definitely recommend you guys check out some of his works. Right. It's definitely interesting. Right. Right. And what's actually interesting is, like I was saying, like he got his the scientific method, which actually did come from a Quran verse, right? Right. And one of the Quran verses is actually from Surah Al-Mulk, right? Okay, chapter 67, verse like 3 to 4, right? And that verse basically says, "You will find in the creation of the most merciful any inconsistency, so return your vision to the sky. Do you see any breaks?" Right? Obviously, this verse obviously is implying to observe, right, and to reflect upon the natural world, right, and laying the foundation for empirical investigation, right, which is basically what the scientific method is, right. And if we look at what like the scientific method that is based on Ibn al-Haytham's like methodology, right, even like how it has developed, right. The first one is observation, right, noticing something in the world, right, like a phenomenon, right, like for example, like I guess an apple falling from a tree, right, that is technically a phenomenon, right. And another fun fact, right, I think it was Ibn al-Haytham or someone else who, but he was again another Muslim who discovered gravity 600 years even before Isaac Newton, right, right, but they never give him the credit. They always say, I don't know why they say Isaac Newton, but yeah. And also, getting back to the scientific method, right? The second one is questioning, right? Asking pertinent questions about this phenomenon. Wait, why did the apple fall from the tree? Right? And then the hypothesis formation. Proposing explanations based on initial understanding. All that basically means is coming up with, okay, maybe the apple fell for this such and such reason, right? Maybe it fell because it was too heavy, right? And then experimentation, right? Testing these hypotheses through controlled experiments, right? So you can gather a bunch of apples, maybe, right? Grab them, let go. That's, I guess, in a way, it's an experiment, right? Kind of in the same way that I'm telling you that you can try out different herbs and different foods in general, right? And of course, be smart with it. Like I'm not saying go and drink cyanide. I'm not saying that, right? Or obviously use your brain and like basically yeah, use your brain. You know, at the end of the day, the analysis is also another thing, right? Interpreting, right? So once you do this experimentation, right, you collect data from that, or you get information from that, right? And then you interpret that data. What does this data actually show? And after we do that, we come to the conclusion, right? And then you draw a conclusion. This is actually true. Is this actually helpful, right? That could, in the case of health, does this actually work, right? Like for example, let's just say CMOS, right? Does CMOS actually work? Well, we tried it. Do I feel better? Right? In any way? Maybe I need to do a longer trial run, right? Like that. Maybe it was too short. Maybe I only did it for a week. Maybe I need to try it for a month. Maybe 2 months, 3 months, right? Right? Maybe even a whole year if you're up for it, right? But that's how you basically can use the scientific method. And again, even the scientific method, again, like I said, it's all based on metaphysics, right? AKA theology, right? Hey, so that's why I'm telling you guys that you should become your own scientist, right? So in a way, be literally your own independent scientist, right? Question everything, right? In a way, don't accept information at just face value, right? Investigate and seek evidence, right? Because I mean, I'll give you a very like simple example, right? In school, they used to tell us that Christopher Columbus discovered America, right? Was this actually true, or was this just propaganda from the school system? And the irony is now, right? Later on, as you excel in school, they tell you, oh no, what actually Christopher Columbus didn't discover America. Actually, if we're being like, the earliest evidence of someone discovering America was actually the Phoenicians, right? They even predate the Vikings, right? A lot of people cite the Vikings, but even before the Vikings was the Phoenicians, which is basically just a group of people from like Lebanon, right? That region, like Lebanon, Palestine, right? That region, right? And they were the first ones, right? Which is again also where the Carthaginian Empire also comes from, right? People like Hannibal and stuff, right? And the Carthaginians and the Phoenicians in general were known to be really good sailors in general, right? So yeah, but even like Christopher Columbus, like if you look at like the maps that he was using, a lot of them were from like the Muslims who used to live in Spain and Andalus, right? He usually used those same maps to guide him to go there, right? Ironically enough, right? And then yeah, but basically what I'm saying is when they give you a narrative, right, or someone tells you something, you should definitely double check if it's true. Even in Islam, there is something like known as dalil, which basically just means evidence, right? Proof, right? And anytime someone like tells you a Quran verse or narrates a hadith or gives you any information, you should always ask for the dalil, okay? aka evidence, right? Where is this? Is this actually true, or someone could just be making this up, right? Like, because there is unfortunately a lot of things people make up, right? Right, and you could take it to an extreme. Obviously, don't be like become super paranoid or anything, right? But at the same time, don't just become gullible and accept everything, right? Unfortunately, a lot of people are like this, right? They just trust the expert, so called, right? But you don't even know where that person studied from or his teachers, right? Like, you know what I mean? So yeah, that's what I'm telling you guys. Experiment, become your own scientist, right? It's okay. And of course, just use your brain. Don't be stupid with it. Don't don't like be dumb, all right? Hopefully, I made that clear, right? And look, not all of your experiments are going to succeed, right? Some of them are obviously going to fail, right? That's just the nature of it, right? That's why it's an experiment, right? We're trying to find out, right? And I forgot who it was exactly. I think it might have been Thomas Edison or Nikola Tesla. I forgot who said this, but it's like each time I failed, I got closer to success, right? Basically, if you fail one time with an experiment, you just keep going and going, right? And keep trying something new, right? Maybe it works, maybe it doesn't, right? And there's no shame in that, right? But each time you fail, it provides a valuable insight, right? Maybe it failed because I didn't run the trial long enough. Right? That could be it. Maybe, or maybe it's not a time issue. Maybe it's the amount, right? It could be anything, right? Right. But you need to embrace that, right? And embrace the failure and not be and not shy away from it, right? And unfortunately, they've done a really good job at basically propaganda promoting. Oh wait, actually, like you shouldn't experiment with yourself. No, just trust us. Take our word for it, right? And don't question it at all. And remember, the goal isn't to just dismiss the expert, of course, but it's just to engage with it critically, right? By doing your own, right? Right? When you experiment with your own hands, right? And your own mind, right? Which is more important, right? Right? You can make more informed and better decisions, right? Which are actually based on not just he said or she said, right? Based on your own personal experiences and understanding, right? Right, and also like it's like just think about it from a mental perspective, right? When you become your own independent scientist, right? You could even call yourself a natural philosopher if you want, right? Like the OG term, right? You take control of your learning journey, right? Because I don't know if everyone did this per se when they were younger, but maybe you did, right? When you were experimenting stuff in high school, right? Or maybe in middle school or whatever, right? In school, just in general, right? You were experimenting, right? You probably have never experimented after that, right? After that, you have never experimented ever again, right? So, and it's like the same thing with a lot of people. They read books a lot in high school, and they read a lot of books that, if we're being honest here, literally make no sense, right? Which is, again, I don't want to dive into it. That'll probably be another video, right? Teachers, like, again, there's a reason why they make you read certain books, right? And they make you waste your time with less pointless books and romance novels and just like novels in general, right? Like, I'll be honest, right? Don't stop reading just because, like, you shouldn't be punishing yourself with reading, right? Reading is meant for what? Right? Reading is meant for getting value, right? And I'm not saying never read fiction, but again, I don't know if there's necessarily too much value in it, right? It depends, you know what I mean? But the point is, read books that'll help you, right? And you take control of your learning journey, right? That's the whole point of this experimentation, right? Right? You want to become an active participant in your quest for truth, right? Rather than this passive recipient, like where you're just accepting information and it's just like, oh, you're not even double checking to see if it's true or not, right? Like, not only is that terrible, like just like being this passive recipient, right? Like, you could be so gullibly misled, right? It's just insane to me how someone could just allow that, right? This approach not only leads you to personal growth, but it makes you have like a deeper connection of the world around you, right? So look, at the end of the day, you want to be that independent scientist, right? Literally become an independent scientist, right? Right? You're not funded by like you're not funded by me or anyone really, right? To continue these studies and everything, right? But at the end of the day, it's like, really, it's for your own understanding and for your own betterment, right? That's the whole point of being an independent scientist, right? Because a lot of these scientists, right, when you dive deep into who's like funding them and who's like, you know, yeah, basically who's funding them and who's pulling the strings, so to say, right? Because I remember there's like this. I'll give you an example, right? There's a study that says red wine is like good for you, and then you look into who actually funded that study. It's the alcoholic companies. So clearly, there's an agenda there, right? So, so please, like, just blindly accept things, right? I remember even when I took a stats class, a statistics class, a while back, and I believe I honestly got more from that class than people who probably were acing the test, right? And just blindly let me just do the homework and that's it, right? One thing that I remember is that not all variables are taken into account with a lot of these stats. And I'm not saying statistics isn't useful, right? Right, it has its time and place, but sometimes you do have to take them with a grain of salt, right? And this goes for almost any stat, if we're being honest here, right? Right? Which is why it's important to, really do your own research. Be a literal independent scientist at the end of the day. Because there is no excuse for ignorance in the age of information, right? It's the only time in human history where we can literally look up answers to things, right? It's it's something we should definitely utilize, right? So many people just pass up that opportunity for no reason, right? At the end of the day, it's like let's really try to hone in and focus on that, right? Like, think about it. The only time in human history where information is just right in your hands, literally right in your hands, right? Right. Just think about that. People used to travel thousands of miles just to learn something, and we have it literally right in our hands, just literally one search away. So why not do the diligence, right, and actually search for that knowledge, and of course implement it if it's useful. Or, and again, this reminds me of a Bruce Lee quote: where take what is useful, discard what is not, and make what is uniquely your own, right? He applied that to martial arts, but you could honestly apply that to life in general, right? So, I hope I've made my point very clear, right? Be that independent scientists, right? Try to actually experiment with different things. And I mentioned like health, like try this new exercise. Maybe it works, maybe it doesn't, or this new variation, right? I don't want to say I consistently change my routine, but I recently did change my routine, right? Like for example, I used to do the cable, I guess you would call them cable press like this, decline press. But I noticed I would feel it way too much on my bicep, and that was not my goal. So I switched it to, I believe, what did I switch it to? Incline. Yeah, incline bench press or dumbbell press technically, right? Because I didn't want to feel it in my biceps. My goal is to hit my chest, not my biceps. All right. And after experimenting with it, I realized, oh yeah, this is good. Right. So don't be like, don't be basically that weakling coward who's just afraid of experimenting because he's just been so coddled by society and he's been, put down. He's been beaten like a dog and he's just too afraid to like, is to get out of the mental cage, right? And that's what unfortunately society kind of has done, right? They put you in this mental cage, right? It's very unfortunate, right? Very unfortunate. But yeah, let's try to be our independent scientists, right? But yeah, if you do need any, if you do want to learn how to do that, you can always join my Patreon. The link is below, right? And of course, remember to like and subscribe this video. But until next time.